Marg is an active campaigner for black cockatoos in Underwood Avenue bushland. She's been a UBC committee member and secretary since 2004. She actively monitors EPA proposals that affect native habitat and prepares submissions for UBC. And I'll introduce Mary now. Mary's going to speak after Marg, but I think equally you all know Mary Gray. She was instrumental in forming UBC and has been on the committee 29 of the 30 years that we've been in existence. Her passion and dedication in striving to protect and enhance our urban bushland has earned her an OAM. So I'm going to get Marg's presentation up now, and I'll hand over to Marg.
Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. So this talk has points about the EPA's process. A lot of it's been covered already. How to submit comments, and then gives two recent examples. So, okay. So I said, let's jump right in. That's another Matthew Owen. So the environmental, echoes a bit. Sorry?
That's all right.
Okay. The environmental impact assessment process is used where significant proposals, strategic proposals and land use planning schemes are referred to the EPA. Examples of proposals, as we've heard, relate to mining, industry and infrastructure. If the EPA does not formally assess a proposal, it may give informal advice, and the EPA must decide the question, are impacts acceptable? So how do you know when development proposals are being advertised? So you can log in there, and that avoids the last minute worry and rush when someone rings you up and says there's a referral done and we need lots of submissions, but it has to be done by tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Where do I turn over? So the nominations are entitled The Latest Consultation for the EPA.
Which page
Yeah,
do you want?
the next one, stage.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, you can read those. They're the stages of the environmental impact assessment process. Next one. Professor Tonks referred to the consultation hub. It's really simple to follow. It he said there were 5 stages. I just got that off the EPA site, and there's 4. And give us your views. As he said, just a 1 page would do. So normally we'd ask for assessment as a public environmental review because you want as much input from the public. So you need to read about the proposal by accessing additional information and submit comments as dot points or quite simply. And there's the box that says give us your views, make your submission here. And then significant. The EPA tells us on their website the terms significant impact and significant effect are not defined in the Act. Therefore, the ordinary meaning applies. One of the factors the EPA may have regard to is public interest. That's why I put that slide up with this Heidi over there, and the Nekuma public interest and expertise. Lynette actually lived in the bush around Shenton Park and went to Dollymont Primary School. Environmental principles, you have them on that piece of paper there, and Professor Tonks went through it. Sorry, the principles, yeah, that's good. Thanks.
This one?
Yeah. So, and then also Professor Tonks went through the environmental factors and objectives. So these are the themes: sea, land, water, air, people, and then there's the factors and the objectives. So an example, one example was already given, but under C is coastal processes. and the objective is to maintain the geophysical processes that shape coastal morphology so that the environmental values of the coast are protected. And I have another example under land, flora and vegetation. The objective is to protect flora and vegetation so that the biological diversity and ecological integrity are maintained. Thanks. So how to start? So I recommend putting in your logo if you have one, and then the address, the online address is probably the best, that's how they prefer it, and the date by when the submission is due, because if you didn't do that, you might get so involved with doing your submission you've gone over the time limit, and then they won't accept it. And then put in the title of the proposal. My next action would be to go into the garden to see if I could find a spider or a moth. This is because unconsciously my mind is thinking of the difficulties ahead, and the mind substitutes either a new aim or goal, that of finding a spider or a moth. But returning to task, we suggest you comment under the headings, for example, flora and vegetation, fauna, social impacts. Using expert references must be helpful. Use any recovery plans or papers, statements pertinent to the proposal. For example, the recovery plan for Carnaby's cockatoo is to stop further decline in the distribution and abundance of Carnaby's cockatoo by protecting the birds through their life stages and enhancing habitat critical for survival throughout their breeding and non-breeding range, ensuring that the reproductive capacity of the species remains stable or increases. Well, we're not doing that. Another quote was, the level of threat for Baudin's black cockatoos is soon to be upgraded to critically endangered. That's from BirdLife. Some other points. State that the proposal is a significant proposal and you think it is because you've decided to make comment. As we've been told, use your specific local knowledge, draw attention to the cumulative impacts, challenge rationalising and unacceptable statements. For instance, quote, confirmed black cockatoo breeding trees will be left until the residents, that is, the black cockatoos, have moved, whereby clearing will again be permitted. I understand that black cockatoos like to come back to the tree where they were born in, so it's not much fun returning if they're not there anymore. Challenge the use of offsets that are supposed to mitigate the loss of habitat, loss of vegetation, but which leaves significant residual impacts and a net loss. Offsets are supposed to be used as a last resort. Challenge a bad condition. For instance, clearing will be conducted in a linear fashion so the animals can escape the clearing. Where are they going to go? They'll have nothing to come back to. Sometimes some of the proponents, consultants, do really good reports, and I remember one from Phoenix EX Proprietary Limited. I think their report took 4 years of research. They did a lot of taxonomic work, and there seems to be an interest in micro invertebrates and spiders, so they did a great job. So, and finish your submission with a strong statement stating what you want the EPA to do. Yeah, thanks. So this was one submission we did fairly recently. So the larger area is the Kemerton supporting industry. No, it's not. The Kemerton strategic industrial area. So the area, this is northeast of Bunbury. So the area within the blue line is proposed for industry, and the diagonal lines are supposed to be the buffer. That's 5,000 hectares. So the area in red was a separate reviewed report to the EPA, and that's about 280 hectares You'd think it would be included in the buffer, wouldn't you? But it's separate. But it's also got over 16 hectares of Banksia woodlands, nearly 11 hectares of which is a threatened ecological community. In addition, 21.34 hectares of foraging habitat considered critical to the survival of black cockatoos, and 168 potential breeding trees for black cockatoos are considered significant. As well, the whole development area is a winter wet plain where groundwater is at or just below the surface during mid-winter to early spring in an average year. So the consultant stated that suitable offsets are proposed to compensate for these significant residual impacts. Only one submission was received for that one from the EPA, and the EPA's decision was not to assess because it was dealt with through other statutory decision-making processes. It was referred to the federal government, so I guess, and it was considered a controlled action, so I guess that's why the EPA decided not to assess. Thanks. So I'll let you read that if you can see it. So we only made comment on one factor, terrestrial fauna, just because you can't do everything. So we made comment under the headings larger fauna, black cockatoos and macroinvertebrates. And we prefaced it with the UBC position. The UBC considers that the proposal is inhumane and could lead to local extinction of animals. Quotes reference must be helpful to the EPA. An example is today's State of the Environment report clearly shows that unless we radically change course, we're heading towards species extinctions, degraded landscapes and a less resilient nation. Oops. And also, this is a quote, collectively the surveys indicate that short-range endemism in the invertebrate fauna in this area of the Northern Jarrah Forest is much greater than previously thought. Another point is that I think there's about 8 proposals for quarries around the Bunbury Outer Ring Road, because Main Roads has a stipulation that basic raw materials must be sourced close to the Outer Ring Road to cut transport costs. And the proponent's solicitor, Lavin, states that for that law firm's proponent, the limestone extraction is required on an urgent basis to meet the needs of the state government's Bunbury Outer Ring Road initiative. Thanks. And we've been told that before. And community members or groups can't refer a proposal to the federal government, but they can ask the federal government to call it in, as I understand it. And thank you. We're very anxious about the ability of black cockatoos to persist into the future. Thank you for your attention. I'll hand over to the chair.